But I'll tell you what, can I give you two examples of real cases?
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Okay. So there's like two here that I think are good, and the first one is scary, and the second one is great if you're a U.S. based manufacturer. So the first one is it's a gosh, I think it's 2016 from the U.S. Court of International Trade, and it's called Energizer Battery.
Uh-huh.
And what it is Energizer was basically doing an LED flashlight, and they wanted to confirm that this thing was TAA compliant. And what they did is they grew the LED in China. Most of the batteries, or excuse me, most of the content and the materials were Chinese, although in truth they were international. They'd have like the plastic housing, the click on off button, all of those things were sourced internationally, and then they were shipped into the United States. And then here in the United States, they were all put together, washers, screws, nuts, right? All that careful work. And then ultimately it was manufactured. Before, just a bag of parts.
Yeah.
In the end, a functioning flashlight. None of this you would want to buy individually, but this is exactly what the government wants to buy. And so Energizer's rationale was it's been substantially transformed because it's this manufacturing process in the United States of integrating these 50 or so parts has resulted in a new product with a new name, a new character, new use, new function.
Hmm.
And the court ultimately said, no, Energizer, that's not good enough. And there's a couple key things as to why they pushed through on it. One, they actually pointed specifically to the LED and said the LED is Chinese origin. And at the end of the day, a flashlight, its key purpose is to emit light. So if the light emitting portion of this was Chinese origin, that hasn't changed when you bring it into the United States. So they
Hmm.
actually kind of looked through to what parts gave this thing its essential character. So I
Okay.
said before that generally TAA doesn't care about content. That's mostly true unless like the government or unless customs is trying to like get to the thing that gives this end product its essential character. And so in the case of the LED flashlight, they said the fact that that LED is Chinese origin, we consider to be a little bit important. But the other key part of it too is that they realized, they said all of these other parts, they're pre-cut, they're pre-shaped. There's nothing unique in America where the battery housing was maybe your base cap and then the sleeve and then the head, right?
Hmm.
And all of those, all that you had to do was screw those together. Over the course of a few seconds. If they were maybe one piece that had to be cut and then come together or something like that, if there's something more meaningful that was happening to them. But the fact that these pieces, as they were imported, had their assembled intent preset, the court ultimately said, yeah, that you haven't substantially changed these components or these contents. And so at the end of the day, they said to Energizer, no, your flashlight is not TAA compliant because all that you've done is mere assembly. And then not helping this, at the end of the day, it really only took about 7 minutes for a trained technician, but not necessarily like MIT trained, right?
Yeah.
So it can just be somebody off the street that has some basic training on how to do this. It didn't require special tools. And so again, all of these things, I said, it's a holistic analysis. The Court of International Trade ultimately said, we don't really view this as a meaningful, substantial process. Yes, it's assembly. And yes, it's maybe more than just 2 or 3 seconds of screwing a thing together, but it's not a substantial enough process that's changing the content into the item that has a new name, new character, new use. So, but the second one is great news for US based manufacturers. And this came out, gosh, I think it was just last year, 2021, out of the US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. And it's called Acetris Health v. United States. And what this was Acetris Health was a pharmaceutical supplier, and they were selling pharmaceuticals to the Veterans Administration. And the VA contract said, your products need to be TAA compliant, right? Okay, that's what most of these things say. So they were selling a product where they would source the active ingredient from India. They would bring it into the United States. they would compound it, they would capsulize it, they would package it, and then they would sell it to the VA. They had previously sought guidance, and they had gotten a TAA decision from US Customs that said that does not work. That is not substantial transformation, because again, peeking through to the key aspect of it, I buy a medicine because of its active ingredient. I really don't care what the pill's shaped like. So to the extent the active ingredient started in India, it was not really changed here in the United States. The U.S. Customs said, no, that's a product of India for purposes of the Trade Agreements Act. Okay, so Acetris Health said, but that's actually not exactly what the rules say. The rules and regulations say that a product needs to be wholly a product of a designated country or substantially transformed. So two-part test. I don't know that anything is wholly anything anymore unless it's a some kind of crop or produce. So they said, okay, look, we recognize that this is not substantially transformed or wholly a product of any of these designated countries. But there's a second part to the definition as to what qualifies when it's a U.S. made product. And for a U.S. made product to qualify under the TAA, it needs to be substantially transformed or manufactured in the United States. And Acetris Health said it doesn't say that it needs to be substantial or wholly manufactured in the United States. It actually omits that adverb. It just needs to be manufactured. So they said, look, we're doing some kind of a manufacturing. We will concede the fact that that active ingredient doesn't change. We'll stick with the customs decision that says this is India. But we submit to you that this raw, kind of powdery, whatever active ingredient it is, that's not what the government wants to buy. That's not what it's giving to its veterans. It wants the pills. It needs this compounded with whatever elements are in there. And that's a meaningful process that we are applying here in the United States. And we're going to call that manufacturing of these pills. And under the definition in FAR 25.003 as to what constitutes a U.S. made end product, it needs to be substantially transformed. We're not arguing that it's substantially transformed, but we are saying that it was manufactured in the United States, which gives them in. And the Federal Circuit said, yeah, we agree with you on that. So the truth of the matter is substantial transformation, I think, is what we normally think about when we think about TAA compliance, and because I think that's the dominant theme over the last 20, 30 years. But you also have this case from last year that reminds us that even if your product is not substantially transformed in the United States, if it's manufactured, which is generally considered a little bit of a lesser standard, if it's manufactured in the United States, like what Acetris was doing with these pills, it could still qualify under the Trade Agreements Act, even if it's not substantially transformed. So that gives, I think, a lot of hope and opportunity, frankly, for US-based manufacturers that maybe can't get in and change the chemical nature of these active ingredients, but they can do something meaningful to it beyond just mere assembly, beyond just packaging it to deliver it to the customer. So that was a great win, I think, for industry.